Jonathan Carl.
Back in January, the president said that nobody in his campaign had been in touch with the Russians. Now, today, can you still say definitively that nobody on the Trump campaign, not even General Flynn, had any contact with the Russians before the election?
My understanding is that what General Flynn has now expressed is that during the transition period, well, we were very clear that during the transition period, he did speak with the ambassador.
I'm talking about during the campaign.
I don't have any. There's nothing that would conclude me that anything different has changed with respect to that time period.
And why would the president, if he was notified 17 days ago that Flynn had misled the vice president, other officials here, and that he was a potential threat to blackmail by the Russians, why would he be kept on for almost 3 weeks?
Well, that assumes a lot of things that are not true. The president was informed of this. He asked the White House counsel to review the situation. The first matter was whether there was a legal issue. And we had to review that, whether there was a legal issue, which the White House counsel concluded there was not. As I stated in my comments, this was an act of trust. Whether or not he actually misled the vice president was the issue. And that was ultimately what led to the president asking for and accepting the resignation of General Flynn. That's it, pure and simple. It was a matter of trust. We went through a very deliberative process, a very thorough review. The first part of it was clearly to understand the legal aspect of this. And that was simply concluded there was no legal aspect. And then what happened is the president evaluated the trust aspect of it. Major.
When the president was asked on Air Force One on Friday rather,
Right.
traveling down to Mar-a-Lago, about reports, about conversations with the Russians, about sanctions, he said, "I don't know about it. I'll look into that."
Mm-hmm.
Was he being truthful?
No, what he asked specifically is, was he aware of a Washington Post story? He hadn't seen that at the time. Of course he was involved. I just said that he was aware of the situation right after the White House counsel informed him back in January.
And his inquiry to the White House counsel was strictly about the legalities involved, not the propriety of the conversations between General Flynn and the Russian ambassador.
Well, initially, just to be
clear,
clear,
criticism of the merits of those conversations about sanctions before the Trump administration had been inaugurated.
so just to be clear, the acting attorney general informed the White House counsel that they wanted to give, quote, a heads up to us on some comments that may have seemed in conflict with what he had sent the vice president out in particular. The White House counsel informed the president immediately. The president asked him to conduct a review of whether there was a legal situation there. That was immediately determined that there wasn't. That was what the president believed at the time from what he had been told, and he was proved to be correct. The issue, pure and simple, came down to a matter of trust. And the president concluded that he no longer had the trust of his national security advisor over.
It was proper for the incoming national security advisor, not part of an administration, to be discussing an issue as sensitive as sanctions with the Russian ambassador.
I mean, his job is to discuss issues with his counterparts. I mean, Charles Krauthammer put it perfectly last night. That's what he's supposed to be doing. I mean, that's his job. We would constantly read out throughout the transition who he was speaking to, how he was getting ready. The president was receiving congratulatory calls from around the world. We would read out the world leader calls. The job of the incoming NSA is to sit down with the counterparts and start that dialogue. And that's exactly what he did. So the question wasn't, did he do anything improper or illegal? It's the question of, could he be trusted further? And that trust, or the erosion of that trust, was frankly the issue. So,
Did the president instruct him to talk about sanctions?
no, absolutely not. No. But no, and that's never.
So would you prefer he had not done that?
Well, I think the president had no problem with the fact that he acted in accord with what his job was supposed to be doing. He had the ability to talk about issues that were important, whether it was that or the 30 other countries that he spoke to. That was part of his job. As has been noted by many people, that's what the National Security Advisor and, frankly, other positions do. They begin the process of preparing their incoming job by talking to counterparts, people who have previously held the job, etc. If he had not done that, there would be questions as to whether he was properly prepared on day one.
Conversation about sanctions.
No, the issue isn't whether or not what he discussed. There's been a complete legal review of that, and there's no issue with that. The issue is whether or not he failed to properly inform the vice president or not be honest with him, or not remember it. But that's the plain and simple issue. And when he lost trust with the president, that's when the president asked for and received his resignation.
Thanks a lot, Sean. Yesterday, Kellyanne Conway, a counselor to the president, said that the president continued to have trust in General Flynn.
Right.
What happened between yesterday morning and yesterday evening that led the president to lose confidence in General Flynn?
Well, I'm not going to get into the specifics of where the president's thinking was, but I will just say, as I noted in the opening statement, that it was an evolving and eroding process. And so at the end of the day, the president made a decision, as he does on all subjects, and asked for and received the national security advisors. But he is one of those people that we've noted before. When he's ready to make a decision, he makes it, whether it's hiring somebody or asking for someone's resignation. Once he is determined that he has made a decision on any subject, that's when he informs the staff. So going into the day, it was an evolving situation. He made a determination late in the day, and he executed on it. Yeah,
He's
Alexis.
an extremely loyal person, General Flynn. Was it a difficult decision for the president to let General Flynn go?
Well, sure. I mean, General Flynn is a dedicated public service. He's headed the DIA. He has been an outstanding member of the Army, both as an officer and then as a flag officer. He's served this country admirably. And I think the president appreciated his service to his nation, his commitment to his campaign, and his service to this country so far. But at some point, the decision came down on whether or not that trust had eroded. The important matters, as I mentioned, that are before the president when he's dealing with issues of world matters, of all of the issues, friends and allies, foes, hotspots. He needs to rely on a national security advisor to give him sage advice. And I think at a certain point, that guidance, that trust eroded, and the president, as he does on all matters, ultimately decides that when he's ready to make a decision, he executes. Alexis.
Questions. Does the president believe that anything that he discussed with General Flynn during the transition might have been construed by the general as a request or an encouragement to discuss sanctions with the Russian ambassador? That's question number one.
So, then we're going to pause. So on the first, again, as I made clear, there's nothing that the general did that was a violation of any sort. He was well within his duties to discuss issues of common concern between the two countries. I will say it again. What this came down to is a matter of trust. The president was glad that he was out there conducting his job, preparing for his job, going back and forth with his counterparts throughout the world, much as the president had done, with all of these world leaders calling the president, congratulating him, looking to set up calls for him once he was inaugurated. Similarly, General Flynn was beginning that process with his counterparts throughout the world. That was never of a concern to the president from day one that he was briefed from the White House counsel. The issue, plain and simple, came down to a matter of trust. And once that occurred, it was over. So, I'm sorry, no.
Question number one, just to clarify.
Yeah.
The president does not believe that any discussion that might have taken place, and we know from
Right.
intel it did, on sanctions, creates a problem for the president in any way. That is not a problem, that General Flynn discussed sanctions with the Russians.
No, there was, as I can't state it clearly enough, there was nothing in what General Flynn did in terms of conducting himself that was an issue. What came down to, plain and simple, was him misleading the vice president and others and not having a firm grasp on his recollection of that. That's it.
Here's question number two. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill from both sides of the aisle would like to investigate or probe or ask more questions about this. Does the president hope to cooperate with those investigations? Would he instruct members of his staff who work for him here and in the administration to cooperate with those investigations?
Well, we're going to comply with the law. I think the president feels very confident. The review that was conducted by White House counsel was very thorough and concluded very conclusively, as he had first instinctively come to the conclusion that there was nothing wrong. So, people are free to do what they wish, but I think that they will find exactly what the president first believed and what the White House counsel concluded. And frankly, I believe a couple publications even reported that there was no investigation for a reason, because there was not an issue of law, it was an issue of trust. George.
When do you expect to have a replacement in place? And secondly, on another topic, there was a report yesterday that one of your colleagues said the White House is keeping dossiers on reporters.
Yeah.
Can you say if that's true or not?
That is absolutely not true. There are no dossiers being kept. Just a binder that I put right here. That's about it. That was a joke. Hold on one second. And then, I'm sorry, George, the first part.
The timetable on a replacement.
Just like the way he handled this situation, the president will meet with individuals, and when he's ready to make a decision and he feels as though the person is qualified and can properly advise him on the issue, he'll make that decision. But that's all, as all decisions, rest with him. I'm just going to go to my first Skype seat. John,